Okay, we are recording, and one of the things, the Oscar program is a program that was started many, many, many years ago. The Oscar is orbiting satellite carrying amateur radio, and I'm going to share the other screen now and pull these things off of here. But I've got this little page pulled up here on Yahoo, and it shows the various satellites that have been launched. AMSAT, Amateur Satellite Organization, is responsible for coordinating the launch and various aspects of the amateur radio satellite program. And this is a page which gives the status of the satellites that are currently in order and some information on them. This is at www.amsat.org, and there are quite a number of satellites that have been launched over the years. Let me go in here. Oscar 1 was launched in December of 1961, and since then, there have been 100 satellites put into orbit. I'm just going to go right back here, right down to the bottom of the page. Oscar 100 was launched by the Cotter Amateur Radio Society, and that was launched in November 15th of last year, 2018. I don't know the exact number that are actually still live at this time. Again, the AMSAT website can provide all that information, and there are hams that get into this that their sole purpose is to work satellite communications. WO3T, Carmen, I'm going to see if I can bring him up here real quick. Do, 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 do. QRZ.com. And I'm going to put in WO3T, Carmen Pekka. There's a picture of his ham shack right there. He's got some nice equipment, most definitely. But he's pretty heavy into the satellite communications. He is a member of the club, and um, he does come out occasionally to the field day. And if you're interested in satellite communications, he's the person to talk to. And okay, that's just other nonsense. Let's see. But anyway, if you look on in your book there, um, page 103 kind of gives you a little bit of a ham hint. Um, Although not a satellite, the International Space Station does have a fairly decent amateur radio station on board, and it's not unusual to hear them occasionally. And you can just take your portable radio and tune it to FM 145.800 plus or minus, depending on the Doppler shift. And you can sometimes hear the communications from the International Space Station. One of the ways to actually get out there and view it, let me see if I can pull this up here. I'll pull this. It doesn't take much to really bring in the satellite communications or even the International Space Station. But a simple antenna, a little beam antenna like this, hooked up to a portable radio, and you can pretty much track with the tracking software and everything. You can track those satellites, you can track the International Space Station, and you can actually talk to the space station um, in that configuration. So it's not really too difficult. I have yet to do it, but maybe one day I will, sometime or another. But let's go ahead and we'll get started here. Let's see. There was something else on here. We'll get into that the next page a little bit after that. So let me start my slideshow and minimize that. And slideshow from current slide. There we go. Get my, so here we go. Now, we're talking about specifically Part 97. Part 97 covers the amateur radio service. So what is the FCC Part 97 definition of a space station? And of course, you know, there's all kinds of definitions for a space station, but this, again, is dealing primarily with amateur radio. So when you look at these selections here, the choices that we have, it's not any satellite orbiting the Earth, so A is out, and it's not a manned satellite orbiting the Earth, so B is out. That leaves the last two to choose from. And if you look at D, an amateur station using amateur radio satellites for relay of signals, no. The only logical one here is C, an amateur station located more than 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface. We'll get it out here. And you know, it doesn't even have to be in orbit. A short duration suborbital rocket launch containing a radio payload can qualify. If it's 50 kilometers or more above the Earth's surface, it is a space station. Your answer is C. Which amateur radio stations may make contact with an amateur radio station on the International Space Station, or ISS, using 2 meters and 70 centimeter band frequencies? And that's currently what's being used right now are the 2 meter and 70 centimeter frequencies. At one time, it was also 6 and 10. And but again, for the purposes of this course, once you're licensed, and any amateur holding a tech or higher class license can make contact with the ISS. So Gordo throws in there, what a thrill to talk on your small handheld to an astronaut. And it happens a lot. And with the technician class license or higher, you too can explore space with astronauts and cosmonauts. And that, you know, we've come a long way since then. But it is a little bit of a thrill. To some people, anyway. Okay, what do the initials LEO tell you about an amateur satellite? Well, we can kick out law enforcement organization automatically. But LEO it's very straightforward and very simple. It is a satellite which is in low Earth orbit. C is your correct answer here. They're not geostationary. They are in a low orbit, and it reduces the amount of power we need to hear our own signals coming back. Answer is C. Okay, this diagram is also in your book. It talks a little bit about some planned satellites that are actually going to be in higher elliptical orbit. Golf planned orbiting amateur satellite position with respect to Earth changes in elliptical orbit. This is to allow for a broader range of communications, also to allow for a longer range. When you have a satellite orbiting the Earth and everything, it's only there for just a few minutes. And once it passes overhead and it's done, it is out of range. So there is a project going on right now to kind of extend that out a little bit. Cohen, how you doing? Welcome to the class.
Thank you. Very well. How are you?
Well, recovering.
That's good to hear.
Yep. although I'm still in a little bit of pain from my surgery, I'm okay. I'm taking less and less pain meds, which is a good thing.
That's good. Good to hear that.
You haven't missed too much. What are you
Okay.
pointing to? Dave, is there a satellite in your room there? There it is. You're pointing. It's pointing. I saw him pointing.
Yeah, we were wondering how often they rotate around the
Does it
the Earth.
vary?
Probably varies on the.
A good question. I don't really know, but if you have a tracking satellite program, it'll kind of give you an idea. Like I say, AMSAT, the AMSAT website can answer all those questions for you, and you might get them, a couple times a day, once a day, whatever. The program, there's an app on my smartphone which tracks the ISS. It also has the ability to track the other satellites if I want to plug them in there and track those specifically. But how often they actually come around is unfortunately not an answer I have right off the top of my head right now. So, sorry. Okay, moving on. Which of the following are provided by satellite tracking programs? Yeah, the satellite tracking programs, be it on your computer or an app, can provide some specific information regarding any satellite or even the ISS as it orbits the Earth. And if you look at all these, in essence, the correct answer for this is D. All of these choices are correct. You can get the maps showing the real-time position as it tracks over the Earth, and you can get the time, azimuth, elevation, and all the other information, the frequency transmission, including the effects of the Doppler shift. Does everyone know what the Doppler shift is? Any idea? Okay, you guys, John, you guys being train guys, okay, if you've ever stood by and listened to a train, all right, and it's blowing the horn, it eventually gets louder as it comes, and it also gets a little bit higher in pitch as it gets closer to you. And so you hear this, and then it goes by, and then it kind of fades out and fades, a little bit lower in frequency. That's what a Doppler shift is. What happens when that satellite approaches, okay, it is a little bit off the center frequency as it approaches, and as it approaches towards you, it's on the high side. As it goes away, it's on the low side. So if you're listening to 145.8, you might hear it at 145.82. And as it gets closer and passes directly overhead, you're going to hear it much clearer on 145.8. And as it goes further away, you're going to hear it much better, say at 145.78. That's your Doppler effect as far as frequency as it fades on the frequency aspect of it. So does that answer your question? Good deal. All right, KEPS, or Keplerian data sets, are updated almost continually, telling you everything about the satellite and allowing you to find any satellite there is. D is the correct answer. Okay, which of the following are inputs to a satellite tracking program? You have the weight of the satellite, the Keplerian elements, the last observed time of zero Doppler shift, and a choice of all these choices are correct. Actually, the only thing you're going to see, you're not going to see the weight of the satellite. So it automatically A is out and D is out. And you're not really going to get the information of the Doppler shift per se, as far as the inputs to a satellite tracking program. But what you are going to get are the Keplerian elements. So properly inserted into your tracking program, the orbits of the satellites can be determined. And these are sometimes known as ephemeris data, meaning they are continually changing, unlike, say, the weight of the satellite. So B is your correct answer on that. Let's see, moving right along. Where am I? Okay, there I am. Okay, what is a satellite beacon? Be very careful with this one. A satellite beacon. Now, you think of a beacon, it transmits a particular set of information, uh, certain things that you want to hear. Um, on Earth, we have beacon repeaters. We have beacon stations, which actually send out particular information like a call sign and maybe even um, a geographical location, things of that sort. And it's on various bands, and that's to aid in propagation. If you happen to hear, if you're on 10 meters, let's say, and all of a sudden you hear a beacon signal from a station in Germany, then you know that 10-meter propagation would be open. Well, with a satellite beacon, it's going to give you also particular information about that satellite. And what it's going to give you is answer D, a transmission from a satellite that contains status information. It's not a primary transmit antenna on the satellite or an indicator light or a reflective surface. It's a transmission from a satellite that contains status information. It is continuous and usually faint, contains or carries the digitized information about the satellite itself. So that is a satellite beacon. What mode of transmission is commonly used by amateur radio satellites? Again, be careful with this one. You don't have to be real careful, but the mode of transmission commonly used by the amateur radio satellites are really, in essence, any of these. But so all these choices are correct. It can be single sideband, FM, CW, or data. But the most popular and common mode of communications through an amateur satellite is FM. So that's why you can take your little handheld radio and you can actually talk to the space station. You're actually using FM on that, but there are some satellites that use single sideband and CW to communicate to and from. And when it does that, when it uses single sideband, keep in mind the FM signal, the frequency modulated signal, is much wider. It can be 10 to 15 kilohertz wide, whereas your single sideband or CW or even other digital or data modes of communication are much more narrow, and thereby it gives you the ability to provide greater bandwidth for multiple conversations on a satellite's linear transponder. But all these answers are correct. Answer D. Oh, who may receive telemetry from a space station? This is not too difficult at all. You kind of look down through the list here, and some of them I have to really laugh at. When you look at B and C and D, none of that stuff is true. That just seems like a whole lot of nonsense to go through in order to receive telemetry from space. So the correct answer for this is A. Anyone can receive the telemetry signal. If you have the ability to receive it, then go ahead and receive it. There are no restrictions on who can receive radio signals. Any question, John? I'll turn your mic on. Hold on. Go ahead.
No, I just mentioned that the key being who may receive. You don't need to be licensed to receive
True
messages. So in the fact that licensed radio amateur was in the other three kind of told me it was A. But that's actually not what I was talking about. I actually have a bar up right now that's kind of hiding the questions. I'm just not sure how to get rid of
What
it.
if you escape?
Let me hit
Oh.
his. Yeah, it's okay. It's
I'm not on that end, so I can't help you there. I don't know. Is it something there on your end?
yeah, it's on my laptop here. There's a little bar, and it's just kind of covering up most of the question. Just popped up. I
I think
probably,
it'll disappear. if you stop.
it might disappear if I quit messing with it.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's not your fault. That's
All right.
All right.
So, yeah, there are no restrictions on who can receive a radio signal. Yeah, you don't even have to be licensed. There's your key right there. I'm glad you picked up on that. So it's not just a radio amateur. It's anyone that has the ability to receive, just like you receive police transmissions on your scanner. You don't have to have a license to receive that. Now, mind you, in some places you do. In order to buy a scanner sometimes in different places, different countries. You can't just intercept any old transmission. Isn't America great? I love America. All right. What telemetry information is typically transmitted by satellite beacons? So, I don't want anybody to get confused with any of this. I mean, all of these look plausible, but really the only correct answer for this is C, the health and status of the satellite. Very basic information. That's your telemetry. That's what's being transmitted by the satellite beacons. It's not going, the beacon itself is not going to put out a whole lot of extraneous information that's unnecessary or that people really don't care about. But it will send out information about the health and status of the satellite. Is it operational? What frequency is it on? And the status of the bird. Is it open for general ham consumption? Things like that. What causes spin fading of satellite signals? Oh, I love this. Spin fading. Now, we kind of we spoke a little bit about Doppler, and there is a spin fading that happens. And it has to do not necessarily with the Doppler effect that occurs, but in actuality with the rotation of the satellite. So as you listen to an FM or single sideband satellite downlink signal, it will rapidly rise and fall in signal strength. And this is called spin fading, and is caused by the satellite rotating in space in order to keep its solar panels from overheating. So not only do you have the Doppler effect that you have to work with, there's also that spin fading from the rotation that can also affect your ability to hear and communicate with the satellite. B is the correct answer. With regard to satellite communications, what is Doppler shift? Now, again, we covered this, and it is predominantly, when you look at it, it's what I talked about earlier. It's C, an observed change in signal frequency caused by relative motion between the satellite and the Earth station. Similar to hearing that train horn. It sounds different far away as it approaches, and it changes as it gets closer, and as it passes by and continues on, it changes in pitch and amplitude as it goes away. So that is what a Doppler shift is, an observed change in signal frequency versus the spin fading, which is a rise and fall of the signal itself. Okay, which of the following is a good way to judge whether your uplink power is neither too low nor too high? A good way to judge whether your uplink power is neither too low nor too high. There are some different ways to do this. And when it comes to satellite communications, they don't want you to put in a whole lot of power, just enough to actually maintain communication with the satellite itself. But, you know, one way to to judge is your signal strength on the downlink should be about the same as the beacon. So if you hear yourself coming back and you sound a little louder than, say, the beacon information, then you know your power is too high. If you sound stronger, you want to cut back your power, and you want to be about the same as the beacon signal itself. And that way, you're not running the risk of overloading the input. Sometimes there are some situations where you can overload the receive of the satellite, and it will shut down if your signal is too strong. So if you're down here on Earth and you've got your antenna pointed at a satellite, and you're throwing out 500 watts to it, that satellite might just shut down and not operate, might have to reset itself. But this is one of the primary purposes of satellite beacons, to give you a meaningful reference for adjusting your transmitter.
Just had a quick question.
Sure.
If you're using a handheld ham radio,
Yeah.
does that go directly to the satellite, or does that go through a repeater?
It will go to the satellite. If you're on 145.800, which is typically the frequency used for the ISS. And I tell you, when you get the information for the satellite, it'll tell you what the uplink frequency and the downlink frequencies are of a particular satellite. And generally speaking, the uplink and the downlink between satellites is usually in a different band. The uplink could be 2 meters, the downlink could be 70 centimeters, and or vice versa. But that information is contained in the beacon and the satellite information. It's doubtful that you're going to overload the receiver with a little 5-watt transmitter with your handheld, and you're gonna have to use a little beam antenna to do that. Does that answer your question, Cohen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, John, do you have something?
Yeah, we were wondering, how do you adjust the power? Say you were transmitting at 500.
Well, if you're transmitting at 500 watts, you're probably going to want to disconnect your power amplifier, because most radios are only going to be, anywhere from 25 to 30, maybe even 50 watts. But even then, you have a low power setting. You have a power setting on just about every radio that I know of has a power setting, which is low, mid, or high. And sometimes you have 2 mid ranges.
So the amplifiers, they might have a lower power setting. Otherwise, it's just at 500 watts, if that's what it's.
Well, you don't really want to use 500 watts. I was just using that as an example. If you're talking to a satellite, the last thing you want to do is you don't want to hook up your power amplifier to your radio to transmit to the satellite. What I'm saying is that if you use a mobile radio in the house or in your vehicle, and you have an antenna, like a beam antenna, like I showed you in that picture, this young lady right here has that little beam antenna. Okay. She's on an HT. She's out in the middle of nowhere with all these people. She's probably got a little HT. She's transmitting maybe 5 watts max on a little handy talkie. But it also has a setting to only pump out 1 or 2 watts. So on a lower power. The main thing to remember is that a rule of thumb is use the minimum power necessary to communicate with a ham radio. That is the norm. That is the recommended way to communicate. So I exaggerated there with a 500 watt linear, because you're not going to, if you're going to get on a satellite, you're not going to want to power up that linear. That's not going to help anything. Chances are, most likely, you're going to use a portable radio or a mobile radio. My recommendation is make sure that whatever power you're using, no matter what radio you're using, that your setting is at 5 watts or less, at least to begin with. And in most cases, 99% of the time, 5 watts is more than enough to communicate with a satellite or even the International Space Station.
Yep. Wait,
Yep.
Linears were illegal with the CBs. They're legal with hams.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, most of your HF radios, your high frequency radios, is going to cover, 160 meters up to 10 meters. Uh, they're predominantly 100-watt radios, and you gotta just kind of know that ham radio is not CB, and CB is not ham radio. Now, one time, amateurs used to own, or not own, but they used to have that 11-meter band as their own until the FCC took it away to make a personal and private communications um, for just the average citizen. And of course, we know how that worked out. Truckers got in on it, and nobody used a license, and so they did away with the license and everything. The rules are still in effect for CB. You still can only use 4 watts on your radio. But yeah, with your with ham radio, you have the ability to pump out 1,500 watts if you want, 1.5 kilowatts of power. Do you want to do that? Not necessarily, unless you're really into breaking through pileups. If there's a DX station that you really want to get a hold of, let's say you've got you're working towards a Worked All Countries award, the WAC Worked All Countries award, and you're just one country away, and it happens to be let's say for lack of anything, Brazil. Okay, well, there's other people trying to get Brazil, and they're all running 100 to 200 watts, and there's people piling up, and you're still trying to get in there. Well, you crank up your 1.5 kilowatts, and you just break through that pile and say, "Hey, here I am, talk to me." And so, yeah, 1.5 kilowatts is a little overkill in my opinion, and most of the time it's not needed. But there are people who use it, and predominantly on 160 meters, it's used quite a bit. But I have a 600-watt amplifier, and I rarely use it. I might turn it on for talking 10 meters locally. Sometimes the conditions are so bad locally on 10 meters that my 100 watts doesn't actually reach out to everybody. So I'll pump about 400, 500 watts out in the atmosphere and communicate with the guys locally on the Tuesday or Thursday evening net on 10 meters. Right now, my HF rig is down. So, and also the wind kind of damaged my antenna. So I got to get out there and fix that. I can't do it with one arm though. Anyhow, does that answer your question? Any others? Good to go? All righty. Moving right along. Let's see, where am I here? Come on, there we go. What is the impact of using too much effective radiated power on a satellite uplink? Well, I pretty much just kind of answered this, but at any rate, predominantly you're going to block access by other users. And so your correct answer for this is B. If you're using too much power, there's going to be people that aren't going to be able to get in there. And again, some satellites are sensitive enough that they will shut down if they have too much power on the receive. But predominantly, by using too much power, you're actually blocking the ability for others to access that satellite. So again, this is another reason why you want to use minimum power. And let's see, the signal leaves less reserve power for everyone else, perhaps blocking access by other users. Your answer is B for that. If you're using too much power. Yeah, one of the things about that that antenna, let's see, where is it? See, that is a gain antenna. You can put maybe 1 or 2 watts into that antenna out of an HT, and that antenna has enough gain on it that the effective radiated power on it could be 6 dB on that. In other words, it's going to double and then double again. If you put 1 watt in, it's going to double to 2 watts. Effective radiated power off that antenna reasonably could be anywhere from 4 to 8 watts effective radiated power with a 1 watt input from your HT. These are all things you're going to learn as you get licensed and move on. This is the stuff that the real learning begins. Okay, what is meant by the statement that a satellite is operating in mode UV? And again, I kind of touched on this, what the UV is, and it refers to the frequencies being used for the uplink and downlink frequencies. In this case, the mode UV, oops, where is it? There it is. If the mode is UV, it means we transmit on the satellite uplink frequency on the 70 centimeter or the U band, UHF band, and we listen to the satellite downlink on the 2 meter or VHF or V band. Again, B is the answer to that. Visit www.amsat.org and it'll give you that information on what the uplink and downlink frequencies are of any particular satellite. Ooh, where am I here? Let's see if there's anything here. If you look on page 108 in your book, it also gives you a chart there of the various frequency bands and the different modes and everything. So if you were using high frequency or 21 to 30 megahertz, and like I said before, some satellites have used frequencies in the 10 meter band, that mode would be H. So if a satellite is operating in a mode, say HV, okay, your uplink would be on 10 meters and your downlink would be on 2 meters, the VHF band. And you see all the different other frequencies that it refers to there. You have the L band, the S band, C band, X band, and K band. So more often than not, you're probably going to be using UHF and VHF for the 70 centimeter and 2 meter bands. Okay, any questions? That kind of brings us to the end of that one. So does anybody have any questions before we continue on with computer stuff? Okay. Let's see. Well, now we're going to go ahead and get into your computer goes ham digital. Give me just a moment. I'm going to pick something up over here. I have here what's called a Signal Link USB, and for the most part, this is used for digital communications. This is an interface which connects between my ICOM 706 and my computer. It has various connections, inputs, and things like that. And once I have my 706 hooked up to the computer, I have a program called Digital Link. Actually, I have several digital programs on the computer which will take the signal as I tune around the band, and I can pick up RTTY, I can pick up FSK, all the other, pretty much almost all the other modes of digital communications on HF that exist today, FT8, things of that sort. But this is a little inexpensive box, and you don't need anything fancy. to hook up. You just make sure that when you buy this, you get the proper cables to interface your particular radio with your computer so that you can operate digital communications. Very simple. There was, let's see if I can find it here. Okay. Back in the early days of digital communications, I had this little MFJ packet radio interface, and this was really a kind of a kludged up connectivity using packet radio. You had connections into the microphone and connections into the computer, and you had switches to set, and you had all kinds of stuff. And that allowed you to communicate using packet radio, packet communications back in the early days of digital on ham radio. And I had a lot of fun with this. Nowadays, it's used for pretty much APRS is what packets used for these days. We don't communicate that way too much. Oh boy. Get my shirt back up around here again. But it doesn't take a whole lot to get into digital communications. Again, people get into the hobby specifically for digital communications. An old high school classmate of mine, he got into ham radio. I talk to him every once in a while, but his main thing is digital communications. He loves to communicate using digital, and that's what he does. The cost of that little USB signal link, I don't think it was too expensive. I can bring it up, like $100 or something like that. And let me bring this up here. Share my screen once more. Tigertronics is a good place to get it. And I think that's where I bought mine. And let's see, does it have a price down here? It shows you all the cables you need for your particular setup. Yes, you can operate the new WSJT-X FT8 mode with the Signal Link USB. Let me go back here. There you go. $114, $139, depends on where you buy it. So it's not really expensive. I think my MFJ TNC was more expensive than that. And I don't use it anymore. It just sits around here, not being used. And not many people use it anymore. So, well, with that, are there any other questions? We'll get started here in the next topic. Good to go? My friend Tom isn't on this evening. My classroom assistant. All right. Topic number 12. Your computer goes ham digital. Okay. Here we go. What code is used when sending CW in the amateur bands? Believe it or not, CW is a digital mode. Let's see, what page does that start? Page 109 is where it starts in your book there. It shows you a key, a picture of a key there. But at any rate, what the correct answer for this one is International Morse code. That's what CW is, a continuous wave. When it says continuous wave and you're doing your little Morse code thing, what it's doing is that it's turning on and off the transmit signal that goes out from your transmitter. When you have your radio on, you turn your transmitter on, and the Morse code key actually breaks that transmission. That's why it's called continuous wave. And by the various sequences of turning that transmitting signal on and off is what produces the tones on the receive end for Morse code. So CW and International Morse code are kind of interchangeable when we're talking about things like that in ham radio. Okay, which of the following VHF, UHF frequency ranges are limited to CW only? Think about this, because there are, I mean, when the FCC assigns bands to the amateur radio service, there are certain portions of each band that are restricted specifically for CW, or CW and digital. But which of the following, we're talking specifically for VHF and UHF frequency ranges, and they're limited to CW only. And you'll find them in the 2 meter band, and you'll find them in the 60 or the 6 meter band. So when you're looking at this, you're looking at the proper answer being A. If you remember 6 meters, 50 to 50.1 megahertz, and 2 meters, 144 to 144.1 megahertz, those are the extreme bottom ends of those two amateur bands, and they are restricted to Morse code only. Some people get this wrong, and I don't know how. It's just 2 bands we have to remember. Okay, what is an electronic keyer? If you look in your book there on page 109, that's what's called a straight key. By tapping that, you turn on and off the transmitted signal to produce the CW tones that are needed. So an electronic keyer is really a device that will assist you in manually sending of Morse code. And typically it uses paddles. An electronic keyer takes a lot of the effort out of the process of manually sending Morse code by forming a string of perfectly timed dots and dashes, depending on which direction you move the paddle or pair of paddles. Give me just a moment. Okay. I have on my desk here, and I'm going to stop sharing. What I have here is I have a straight key mounted on this side, and I have a set of paddles. I can't reach my left arm over on the other side. That's the red things right there. And how this operates is there's a connection on the back. These connections right here go into the radio, and most modern radios have a selection which allow you to determine whether it's a straight key or an electronic keyer or a set of paddles with a built-in electronic keyer in the radio itself. And in this case, you would use these paddles thus, and one side would send out a string of dits or dots, if you want to call them that. We call them dits and DAs, or dashes. The DAs or the dashes. And depending, and it takes a little bit of a training and a quick hand here to actually do this properly, because you're going to touch each side according to the letter that you want to send, or whatever CW signal you want to send out. This is pretty straightforward, because you're actually going to, as a straight key, actually hold it down and tap out your Morse code. I wish this were a live classroom environment. We could actually play around with that. But I hope I've given you kind of an indication of how that works. Any questions? Okay. So for all intents and purposes, an electronic keyer is a device that assists in manual sending of Morse code. There's a manual process, but the internal workings actually send out the dots and dashes depending on which paddle you're hitting. How might a computer be used as part of an amateur radio station? Well, a computer comes in handy for a lot of things. And this is very simple, straightforward, because you can use it to log your contacts. You can put your contact information in there. You can use it for sending or receiving CW. I have a program on my computer called CW Get, which is a CW receiving program. And if it's a clean fist, a clean signal, it will decode all of that and actually print it out on the screen for me. So it kind of relieves my brain from having to translate. One thing to kind of keep in mind is when you're learning Morse code, it's like learning another language. And there are several methodologies used for learning Morse code, if that's something you want to do. I like Morse code. I haven't used it very much since the early days, and as time permits, I'll get in and practice a little bit of my CW Morse code learning, and I still remember everything. It's just the speed at which I receive and transmit are not what it used to be many, many years ago. But when you're learning Morse code, there comes a point when you want to learn to receive much faster, and you can't do that if you're translating an individual letter or character that you receive. You begin to eventually recognize whole words and even sometimes whole phrases and sentences. And in most cases anyway, there is a general sequence of information that is exchanged between ham stations, and it's usually the call sign, the RST report, your receive, signal strength, and readability from the other side. You may have information regarding the type of radio equipment you have, copying down the radio equipment from the other side, the QTH, meaning, where is their location, and things of that sort. So a lot of this information you can almost anticipate, and you can almost listen for it without actually having to do a whole lot of decoding of what you're receiving. CW does become very easy when you get up to beyond 10 words a minute into 15 and 20 and 25 words a minute. Anyway, all these choices are correct. Any questions? CW may not be your thing. You may not want to get involved in it. I don't know. How is your computer's sound card used when conducting digital communications? Now, of course, there's certain noises that certain digital signals actually make, and you definitely want to be able to decode that. The computer will take that information that is input from your radio in the terms of a sound, basically, and decode it accordingly. There are specific sounds, and if you listen to your CD, you can actually hear some different types of digital signals. And some people are so good at it, they can distinguish the difference in an FT8 or a PSK or an RTTY signal. But the sound card actually provides the audio necessary to the radio's microphone input and converts the received audio to digital form. So with appropriate software, you can do the decoding of digital messages. Again, if you have a radio, you don't and you don't have a license, you can still listen in. If you have a radio and an interface and a computer, you can listen into those digital signals. You don't need a license. You only need a license when you transmit. Which of the following connections might be used between a voice transceiver and a computer for digital operation? So there are connections, and I kind of showed you a little bit on the back of that one, of my little gadget here. I'm not even sure. Oh, here it is. It's right in front of me. It shows that there is a USB connection, which is actually going to go to the computer. It has a connection to the radio, also has a speaker, an auxiliary, and a monitor connection as well. So really, C is what you want here. You want to be able to connect the receive audio, the transmit audio, and the push to talk. So that's the only three connections necessary in order to do digital communications. As I said before, depending on your setup, depending on your radio, is going to depend on what cables you're going to need for your radio to interface connection. Most modern radios these days have various connections on them to facilitate the connection of an interface for digital communications. I know that back in the day, some of the older radios actually had what was called an RTTY connection, and all you had to do, if you had an RTTY typewriter or typeset, whatever you call it, all you had to do was connect the cable between your teletype machine and your radio, and voila. And I knew a ham friend of mine who was in one of my classes, and that's what he did. He bought himself a teletype machine and hooked it up to his old radio. It already had the connection on the back. There was no interface. It just had the ability to transmit and receive RTTY automatically. Okay, any questions? Which computer sound card port is connected to a transceiver's headphone or speaker output for operating digital modes? Yep, if you said C, then you are correct. It's either the microphone or line input. So you connect the transceiver headphone or speaker output to the microphone or line input on your computer. Now you can do that, and that gives you the ability without the interface to receive. I did that for a while. I connected the speaker output from my radio to the microphone or line input of my computer, and I could receive those digital communications. I couldn't transmit. I needed the interface in order to have all the necessary connections to transmit out on digital communications. Which of the following connections might be used between a voice transceiver and a computer for digital operation? So, depending on what you want to do, whether you're using packet or IEEE 802, JT65, actually all these are correct. The oldest official digital mode is RTTY or CW with a small adjustment of the definition. So too are IEEE 802.11 and JT65. All of these are digital modes. So what is FT8? Now, keep in mind that for the most part, when you're on HF and you're using digital communications, you're actually sending various tones or digital signals on a modulated signal transmission going out. So A digital mode capable of operating in low signal to noise conditions that transmits on 15-second intervals is an FT8 signal. And it's going to be on your single sideband if you're doing HF, if you're on the high frequency bands. But your radio is not going to be set to a digital mode. It's going to be set to single sideband, and it's going to transmit the signal comparable to what an FT8 is, a digital mode capable of operating in low signal to noise conditions and transmits in 15-second intervals. And this is what makes some of your weak signal conditions possible. Okay, which of the following operating specialties is supported by digital mode software in the WSJT suite? Really, it might be a good idea to look up what that is, WSJT. The person that kind of came up with the JT types of digital communication has a lot of information online to kind of help answer some of the questions you might have with that. So there are some operating specialties supported by digital mode software, and they happen to be moon bounce or earth moon to earth, weak signal propagation beacons, meteor scatter, and all these choices are correct. Have I confused everybody? Worry not. There's not too many questions regarding digital communications anyway on the test. Most of the time, people guess at them. All right. Which of the following may be included in a packet transmission? There are certain error detection methodologies when it comes to digital communications, and each of them, each of the modes has their own brand or their own way to make sure that the information being transmitted is received properly and correctly. But at any rate, a checksum that permits error detection, a header that contains the call sign of the station to which the information is being sent, and automatic repeat request in case of error, those are all the things that could be included in a packet transmission. So all of these choices are correct. What is an ARQ transmission system? Okay. An ARQ transmission system. In your book, let's see, which one was that? T8, D11? I think there's something in here I wanted to look at. Where is it? What page is it? What page is it? I'm too far ahead in the book. Give me just a moment here. Here we go. Okay. You look on page 112, it kind of gives you a setup of a packet radio system. But an ARQ transmission actually stands for an automatic repeat request, and C is your answer here. So it kind of goes into a little bit of a description there that I don't have on the slide that kind of gives you a little better information on what the ARQ actually is. So it lets your digital station automatically ask the other station to say again a missed set of characters. So AMTOR is largely a defunct system error correction or error prevention system. And there's a lot of different methodologies, again, used depending on the digital mode used. So C is the correct answer here. What may occur if data signals arrive via multiple paths? Now, that's an interesting effect. It is possible for your signal to come in from multiple different directions. That signal could be bounced off of something like a building or whatever. But what actually occurs if it does arrive by multiple paths is that your error rates are likely to increase. And because of that, your software is going to send out, a repeat request or some kind of error request to kind of correct that, to make sure that the transmission was received properly. And they add and subtract to your signal. So D is your correct answer there. Error rates are likely to increase if they arrive via multiple paths. Okay, what does the term APRS mean? Now, we kind of touched a little bit on this, but reality A, if yeah, is the correct answer. It's an automatic packet reporting system. GPS equipment is pretty much sized down these days to fit into a cell phone, and some ham radios have a built-in TNC for APRS, which allows you to automatically send your latitude and longitude position packets every couple of minutes with nothing more than a little VHF handheld and a postage stamp sized GPS receiver. APRS is pretty interesting when you get right down to it. Let me see if I can bring something up here. With APRS, you can actually track if the APRS is enabled on the other person's radio, you can actually track somebody else's position because it's sending out that information. It has the GPS built into it. Much like my digital radio now, it has a built-in GPS, and it can tell me, where I am or where my wife is, or at least how far away it is. But if you come up here to the aprs.org, you can pick up certain information on here, and you can actually see different stations as they're traveling down the road. I'm trying to find, I don't see them here. Oh, blah, 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 blah. It says it's not a vehicle tracking system, which is correct. It's not. But there is a way that, let's see. Well, that's just a snapshot. I don't have a real-time map up here. I kind of lost that link once before, and it kind of shows various people in the area and their vehicles if they have their APRS system operational. So there's Tom. Tom likes to use, yes, you're absolutely right, Dave. It has been used in weather balloons. Tom likes to do APRS, don't you, Tom?
I don't have my audio up, I don't think.
You don't have your audio up.
Oh, you heard me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, my camera's not working because I'm not wearing that shirt today.
That's okay. We don't want to see you anyway. We just want to hear you.
All right, I'm here.
Yeah. We're just
Sorry, I'm late.
There's a website that you can go to that shows vehicles in the APRS system locally, but I don't remember what that website is. Do you know what it is, Tom?
Not off the top of my head, but I can go look for it.
Okay, no big deal. All right, but welcome. Glad you joined us anyway. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with ham radio, and it's not just old guys talking on shortwave radios to somebody else in another country anymore. There's also Echolink. There's a lot of number of repeaters out there that are Echolink equipped, and what that is, let me kind of bring this up real quick. Boink. Echolink is kind of a digital mode. It gives you access into Echolink equipped repeater, and there are different node types like conferences, links, repeaters, and users. You can look up places in different countries like Africa, Asia, Europe, North America. In this case, we're going to look at North America and specifically the United States. And we'll go to area 3 right now. And you can see that there's a station. I can go, that's a repeater station, which means if you see that R out there, you can access that repeater at a distant location and put out a general CQ call, and maybe somebody will come back and talk to you. There are people who are just on the air. They're not repeaters. They're just individual users. Like for instance, K3EKQ. He's just on Echolink. I could talk to him directly. We're not using ham radio per se that way, but we're going through the internet. And really, this is all the technology. I mean, you get APRS wrapped up in this. You get Echolink. You get the linking project, the amateur radio linking project, all that. You have the capability, and with digital communications, you have the ability to talk to just about anybody in the world that is similarly equipped using an HT or your computer or, some other methodology within the amateur radio community. So there's something for just about everybody out there, I think. I'll close that down. All right, continuing on with our digital communications. Which of the following is an application of APRS, the Automatic Packet Reporting System? Okay, remember we were talking a little bit about, the GPS and being able to pinpoint things on a map and people using that. So it actually provides a real-time tactical digital communications in conjunction with a map showing the locations of different stations. So if you want to look at a GPS map and see where other ham stations are located around you, APRS can do that for you. Answer A. Which of the following devices is used to provide data to the transmitter when sending automatic position reports from a mobile amateur radio station? So which of the following devices are used to provide data to the transmitter when sending automatic position reports? Of course, that's kind of a no-brainer, the GPS or Global Positioning System receiver. It has a standard NMEA 0183 format that will connect to the terminal node controller that is either built in or external to your handheld or mobile radio. Some of these things are built into the radio. I have a marine radio that I put in my boat. It has a built-in GPS receiver in it, and it also has an automatic emergency response transmitter, meaning I have a button on it. It uses, just a minute. This is kind of a similar technology in ham radio. And let me kind of stop sharing this. And
Hey, Wayne,
we'll go. Yeah.
that link is in the chat window.
Okay, thank you. As you can see, I have a marine radio here. This has a built-in GPS. It has it indicated right up here. And it uses kind of a similar APRS technology. Now, I had to get this registered with an MMI number, and the MMI number is specific to the boat. And when that MMI number is registered to this radio and to this boat, I can, and if I'm in a distress situation, I can automatically lift this little flap here and push this button. And what that automatically does is it goes to one of the emergency frequencies that the Coast Guard monitors and actually sends out my GPS coordinated location. Once they receive that signal, the Coast Guard can look on their little map. They can identify my boat. They know who it is, and they know exactly where I am, and they can automatically mobilize to send help to me immediately. In the meantime, I can also switch on and tell them specifically what my problem is as they are as they are coming to my rescue. So that's kind of a little bit a built-in APRS feature for my marine radio that's used also similarly in amateur radio. Okay. My shoulder's hurting. I need meds. My microphone back down here. Okay, going back to sharing. We're almost done with this session for tonight. So, and yeah, that it does have a specific format. The NMEA 0183 format is a standard in our country. D is the answer. Okay. Next, what does the abbreviation PSK mean? Of course, if you looked at your book, you have that information already at hand, and your answer should be B, phase shift keying. And if you listen carefully, the little warble is indeed information passing over an ultra narrow carrier. And you can hear this on the enclosed CD. And there is kind of a phase shift in there. You hear the sounds of PSK on your HF radio by tuning to 14.070 megahertz. Answer is B. Phase shift keying. Okay, what name is given to an amateur radio station that is used to connect other amateur stations to the internet? Ooh, boy. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is very interesting. And you saw that I just brought up my Echolink application. And what'd you have there? Okay, let's see. Bring this down. Well, John, you're right on top of things there. If you answered A, yes, A is the correct answer. It is called a gateway. There are gateways that allow you to connect to various amateur stations via the internet. They are the systems. Here's some names already listed here. You got, oops, back up. There we go. You got a WinLink 2000, Echolink, IRLP, and D-Star. And these are free gateway stations and are fully automated to provide ham radio operators access to the internet for sending and receiving emails even. Look at that. Look at that. All right. I am going to, let's see, copy this. And let me bring this up. Oh, here we are. Look at that. There we have some weather stations that are on APRS. There's W3CRO. And let's see, do we have anybody traveling? So there's your map for APRS. And sometimes you can actually watch people traveling down the road, down 99 or 28 or wherever they are. And zoom out here a little bit. But if you get a chance, yeah, go to that website that Tom provided, and it gives you information about the APRS network, who's on, where they are, what their call sign is. Okay. Oh, let's see here. What is the Internet Radio Linking Project? My first encounter with this was a UHF repeater up in Ontario, Canada, near Kitchener. And it was really interesting because we're driving down the road. I had this UHF frequency programmed in as one of the repeaters I wanted to access while I was in Canada. And all of a sudden I was hearing stations from different places outside of Ontario, stations in the US, stations overseas like Israel, Germany, Australia, things like that. All of that was being accomplished through the internet and an internet connection into that repeater. So the Internet Radio Linking Project is really answer A, a technique to connect amateur radio systems such as repeaters via the internet using a voice over internet protocol or voice over IP. And it's really interesting. And it is definitely different than Echolink. I don't think we have any IRLP repeaters here in this area. None that I've found. Anyway, what type of tones are used? What's that, Tom?
Yes, we do.
We do? Where?
Well, IRLP is a methodology. It does not refer to any particular network. It's more like saying English or Spanish or German.
Yeah.
The 6.1 repeater has All-Star on it, which is an IRLP, and the DMR repeaters have a form of IRLP linking.
Well, yeah, I know the DMR does.
And the All-Star network that's on 6.1, both of those would be considered a type of IRLP.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware that they were actually linked like that.
Yeah, you can key up 6.1 and punch in a 6-digit node number, and it'll link that node in, and the instructions for doing it are standardized on the internet. It'll work here or anywhere in the country.
Well, actually, come to think of it, I knew that 442-100 had that because I used to hear W3WES get on the 442-100 repeater on occasion, and I'd hear him punching in tones and stuff, trying to access somebody across the pond.
That would be a good thing to demonstrate at a club meeting or something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'd enjoy that.
Sure.
Who would do that for us?
You're speaking to him. You just have to get Kevin to put it on the slate.
Not my president, sorry.
Not my president.
No, I'm just kidding. All righty. Well, there you go. All right, let's get in here. What type of tones are used to control repeaters linked by the IRLP protocol? These are very, very basic questions. And the type of tones that are going to be used are much like what you have on your phone. As a matter of fact, they still are. They definitely are the type of tones that you have on your telephone. Dual tone multi-freak tones, or DTMF, are the dial tones you hear on a common telephone. We use these on our handheld keypad to bring up specific IRLP nodes on initial transmit. A is your answer there. Okay, how is access to some IRLP nodes accomplished? So it's not really rocket science, and predominantly we just had the answer in the previous question, and it's done by using DTMF signals. They're basically phone numbers which access the node in question. So DTMF signals sent from the keypad of your handheld or mobile microphone are the most practical way of accessing these nodes. Now, my wife and I both have DMR radios now, and we're trying to learn a little bit of how to use them. I kind of gave her a little bit of preliminary instruction, and I really would like to sit down and learn a little bit more about DMR. But when you register your DMR radio, you're actually given a set of numbers, a code, if you will. In our case, it's 7-digit code numbers, which identify my call sign and my radio. And if I were to go on to the repeater and my wife was listening, right on the side of my radio, I have the numbers for my radio and for her radio. And I could actually just key in the number for her radio, and it would automatically access her radio, and we would predominantly have sort of a private channel talking back and forth. Conversely, she could do that to me as well. Also, if we were on Simplex, I could do the same thing. If we were using a digital Simplex frequency, if I wanted to access her radio, I could key in her number, and it's just like a phone number. It's a 7-digit number. It opens up her receiver, and we chit chat, whatever, and communicate. So that's kind of what happens here with the IRLP. So what is meant by Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP, as used in amateur radio? Kind of remember, you're using internet communications, and you're sending a voice signal over the internet. And as you look at the different choices there, the only one that really stands out is D. It's a method of delivering voice communications over the internet using digital techniques. And so one of the most amazing things about the TCP/IP protocol, and I'm an old computer guy, so I kind of understand this. If you don't, I understand you don't really have to have a total understanding about it, just kind of know what the answer is. But these are things we can talk about at another time, part of your ongoing learning once you get licensed. So the TCP/IP protocol is really what makes the internet work. And it also kind of shows how well it adapts to new technologies, not even remotely thought of when it was first put together. Voice over IP uses well-established TCP/IP packet switching to send packets of voice over exactly the same hardware as everything else internet related. And if you really want to know what's happening here in this class and how we're doing it, what I'm using here is really, I'm using a voice over internet protocol to conduct this class. I have a digital connection on the internet, and my voice is going into my computer here via my mixer, and my interface is being converted digitally, and it's transmitting out to you folks, where at the other end, on your end, it's being retranslated from a digital signal to a voice signal. So that's, I mean, this is the best example I have right here as far as voice over internet protocol is concerned. We have a digital connection. It's using a TCP/IP protocol, and it's carrying all the information necessary, be it visual or audible, through a digital technique. And there you go. This is digital communication at the finest. This is Jetson stuff. Meet George Jetson. All right. What must be done before you may use the Echolink system to communicate using a repeater? All right. Not only do you have to download the Echolink application to your computer, you're not just allowed to get on and use it, especially if you're a non-ham, because if you're a non-ham and you download it and you're able to connect into a repeater, you're actually transmitting over the airwaves unlicensed. That's an unlicensed transmission. So what you have to do is that you must register your call sign and provide a proof of license. So once you register that with Echolink, you assume the role of a control operator. Get back there. Oops, where is it? Again, let me kind of bring that up. I'll kind of show you some information here on that. Oops, come on. There we go. When you do the setup, it kind of gives you the information here. It says in your system setup, it has my system or my station. My mode is as a single user. I don't know if you can read this very well or not. My call sign, and I can change it if I need to. It has a password, and it stores a password locally. It also says pertinent information that's going to show up over in this window over here. And for most intents and purposes, it's going to show my name and my location as being Coupon. It'll also have my email address if somebody wants to contact me. There is server information, and pretty much this is all static and automatically default, which uses the protocol TCP/IP voice over internet protocol through these various servers. There's no proxy. Some other information, your audio, how you're transmitting and receiving your audio, and different other settings as well. So that's a little bit about what Echolink is all about there, but you have to have a call sign in order to use it. How might you obtain a list of active nodes that use voice over IP? So you can get a list of nodes by subscribing to an online service from an online repeater list or from a repeater directory. So yes, if you answered D, then that is the correct. All of these choices are correct. So if you have a repeater directory, which you can get from the ARRL, it contains specific information about certain repeaters as to whether it's a digital, whether it has a PL tone, other pertinent information. That repeater directory will tell you all that information. So what type of transmission is indicated by the term NTSC? The NTSC is basically a standard for TV signals. If you answered C, it's an analog fast scan color TV signal. And that is the standard, and it's also used by ham radio amateur TV stations. And we have people that are active transmitting pictures of themselves or whatever over amateur radio. Slow scan TV is one that's used predominantly down on the HF bands, and it receives one line of information at a time. And typically what would happen with slow scan TV, if you were receiving a picture, someone was sending one, it would start at the top and it would scan a little bit at a time. And by the time it got down to the last line down at the bottom to give you a picture, the top lines would start fading out. If you use fast scan, you got to use higher frequencies. Okay, what is the typical bandwidth of an analog fast scan TV transmission on the 70 centimeter band? And this follows the same bandwidth allocated to TV signals. TV stations are allocated a bandwidth for each and every signal or each and every TV channel of 6 megahertz. So fast scan on amateur TV on amateur TV is the same. And contained within that 6 megahertz is various information. Now that we've kind of gone to high definition digital TV these days, you'll notice that TV stations have channels like 10-1, 10-2, 10-3, 10-4. That's because with the digital capabilities instead of an analog nowadays, you can send more information in that same bandwidth of 6 megahertz that only it originally used to have just one bit of information, usually your video signal and your audio signal, along with maybe some other pertinent information like captioning was one of those things that can be sent on that analog signal. But now you have 4 stations on that 4 TV channels on that same 6 megahertz. And it's pretty cool. But that's why you use those frequencies in UHF and higher. Since it is very wide, 70 centimeter frequencies and higher, where equipment cost is modest, especially if you already own a video camera. So there you go. Do I have any questions? Because this is going to wrap it up for the night. We're getting into multi-mode radio excitement next time. I'm going to end this slideshow. I'm going to stop sharing, and then you see my pretty puss. So do we have any questions? Anybody have anything that they want to cover, talk about, whatever? I hope I did a fairly good job tonight in covering the topics well. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email, and I'll do my best to try to answer them. One at a time here. John, you and your have anything?
I think we're good here. This will take some extra work for me. The digital, especially, is completely foreign. But
It's foreign to everyone.
yeah,
But yeah, I think I know guys will do okay. And there's a lot of information. Again, leverage that information in the back of the chapter, on the back of that topic lesson, to go online and get a little bit more information on some of the digital modes. There's a lot. I mean, there is a whole lot. There's no need to get overwhelmed with this, because all you really want to do with this is just understand or know what the questions are and the answers accordingly, and go from there. Because again, you're real learning for digital. I haven't learned everything for digital, and it's overwhelming to me. I get into it and it's like, and I've been doing this for 42 years in ham radio, and digital is the newest thing to me basically. And so I get into it, and after about fiddling around with it for a half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, it's like, whoa, my brain's about to explode. I got to stop and regroup and do a little bit more research and try to come up with a little better way on to learn it. But none of this should overwhelm anybody. Just kind of know what the answers are to the topics that were covered, because that's all that we covered tonight is all that is available for the question pool for the exam.
Wayne, can you hear me?
Yep.
One question that Dave brought up was, how long has digital been available to amateur radio?
Quite a long time.
Oh, it has.
Yeah. Like I said before, if you count CW is a digital mode. It's an on and off. It's zeros and ones. But if you want to get into what we mean by digital today, pretty much the packet rage that occurred back in the 70s and 80s was kind of an introduction to me anyway, to digital communications. But even before that, RTTY with teletype machines was a form of digital communications and was quite popular at one time. Hams had these huge teletype machines sitting in their ham shacks, hooked up to their radios, and they'd be typing out messages, and this little paper roll would be spewing out stuff, and they'd be communicating with people all over the world who also had teletype machines. So that's been around for quite a while, and I'm going to have to say that it became a little more readily accessible and available to ham radio about the time the Navy was starting to surplus a lot of their telecommunications type, or their teletype machines. Now, I don't know, maybe Tom has some other information on that he wants to share, if he has any other information. I'm going to unmute your mic, Tom. There you go.
I was going to say the same thing shortly after World War II.
Yeah, exactly. But you see where we are today. I mean, we have come a long way, that new modes have been invented of digital communications. New capabilities have been introduced. And for me, I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg as far as any of this. I will never learn it all. I'm going to be in the grave before I learn this stuff. And as ham radio progresses further down the road, there's going to be newer things. I mean, satellite communications. Come on, 1961, the first satellite was sent up for amateur radio in the Oscar program. And it's been going ever since. And new things happen. So we have the International Space Station. We have all kinds of stuff. And this is no longer my grandfather's amateur radio. This is stuff that I have to leave to the younger generation. It's just that it's important for us to kind of keep this going, even as an auxiliary means of communication in times of disaster, by getting more and more people interested in the various aspects of amateur radio. And there's so much, it's so varied that no one ham can be involved in all of it. That's why I find a niche that really excites you and you really like, and you go for it. Some people are in it for public service, other for satellite, other for digital, other for just talking around the world or talking to their wife, their spouse, their family, you know? Anything else?
Anything else?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Dave, anything from you? Dave Criddle?
No, I'm fine.
Good. How about you, Cohen?
I actually had two questions.
Okay.
The first was with the DMR radios you were talking about.
Right.
Now, can you be a technician class license and still use something like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There is very little that is not open to the technician class licensee. The only thing that you really are not going to have full access to are the HF bands. That's 160 meters through 10 meters. And you do have, as a tech class licensee, you have a small 200 kilohertz portion of the 10-meter band from 28.3 to 28.5 for voice communications. Plus, you have 28 to 28.3 for CW and some limited digital communications. But
Okay.
anything as a technician class licensee, from 6 meters up, it's wide open to you. It's wide open. Digital, satellite, whatever. There are people who will never go beyond the tech class license. And there's one person in particular that has been to our club meetings. He will never go beyond the tech class license because his sole interest is satellite communications using VHF, UHF, and other frequencies above. There's no reason for him to go higher.
My second question, kind of unrelated, well, kind of off topic a little bit, but is regarding the marine radio that you had.
Yeah.
And now, is that strictly like a marine use? I'm
Yes.
saying you couldn't take a unit and use it in a vehicle or something.
Marine radios are specifically legally only used in boats. Now, there are people that have them in their vehicles who live near the shore. They're involved in boating in some way, shape, or form, like charter boats and stuff like that. They have them in their vehicles and they can legally use them. It's not a service that it really, for the recreational boater, doesn't require a license. And so if you have a boat, get one.
Okay, I was just curious. I was just wondering if you could actually use that in a vehicle, just if anyone ever had. I mean, not around shorelines, or which is I understand that part, but I'm saying like you're just driving, like here in Pennsylvania, especially where we are, we're kind of central Pennsylvania.
Yeah, like you want to use it here, it's not really kosher necessarily unless you're on the lake or something like that. I'll tell you this. If you've ever watched what is it, Life Below Zero in the Alaskan wilderness, some of those people up there have radios. And I suspect that those are marine radios, and they are using them for communication as a general radio service. But they also live on the water and live near the water, and they utilize the water. So I don't know how that actually works up there, but I suspect that it is marine radios because you don't need a license to use it. Somebody's smoke detector is beeping.
That might have been mine.
Anything else, Colin?
That's right. I believe that covers it for me.
Okay. All right. I'll answer whatever questions I can possibly answer. And we can cover some things. I mean, think about next week or tomorrow night, what we've talked about tonight. If you have some questions, we'll kind of cover them tomorrow evening as well. And stuff like that. Okay. Anything else from anybody? Everybody good to go? All right. Thank you, everyone who joined us this evening. And hope to see everybody tomorrow evening as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast and wish everybody a good night.